Good evening. Welcome to the public hearing of June 22nd, 2015 of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers.
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mrs. Laura.
Here.
Mrs. McDonald.
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is here. President Burton.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. For those of you who are in attendance tonight or who are watching from home, you may find an agenda just outside our door here. We'll be having a public hearing, and this is anticipated to be a brief, probably about 10-minute or so meeting. It'll be followed by our regular meeting of June 22nd also, and we will have an opportunity for audience communications at both meetings. The next item on our agenda is item number 2, public hearing, proposed 2015-16 budget and millage rates. And we will be hearing from Mrs. Abbey.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. As we do every year, when we bring our budget for the next school year, we have an opportunity to provide to the community the proposed millage rates, taxable values, and a brief synopsis of the general fund budget. So we'll go ahead and do that, and then if the community has an opportunity then to comment on those, on the millage rates and the taxable values and the proposed budget. So we will do that briefly at this meeting, and then later this evening we'll ask the Board of Education to actually adopt the 2015-16 budget. As you know, we've been discussing that at multiple meetings throughout the, well, actually starting in the fall, and then hurried along in the early winter once, of course, we get the proposal from the governor and then from the legislature on what we can actually expect for a budget. So we've had many conversations on those topics. We'll go through that briefly now and then a little more in-depth later, and then we'll ask the Board of Education to adopt that budget at our second meeting tonight. So with that, we're looking at the taxable values for both homestead and non-homestead properties, both in Livonia and that portion of Westland that we service students in. We're looking at a $4.1 billion taxable value overall. That's just about a 1% increase from last year. So that's good. It's going in the right direction. We're happy with that. These are the 15-16 proposed millage rates and the expected revenue generated by each. First, I'd like to say this has not changed at all from 2015 rates, 2014-15. The total millage rate on non-homestead property is 18 mills, and on commercial personal property is 6 mills, raising a total of $23.1 million. You will recall, of course, this isn't extra money. This is actually a part of our foundation allowance. This is the part of the $8,000 plus dollars that we get from the state per student. Part of that comes directly from the state, and a part of that we must collect locally. If we don't collect locally, the state doesn't make that up. We don't get that money. So that is required as part of Proposal A and the student funding enacted at that time. So again, that's up just a little bit from 2014-15. The debt fund remains at 4.6 mills. It's exactly what it was last year or this current year, and is what we had anticipated for this year. So no change in that. And the sinking fund, of course, is what was approved by the voters at 1.12 mills, raising almost $4.6 million. Sinking fund is, of course, used for the purpose of repair in the district. So that's for our building repairs, that's for our roofs or our parking lots or water main breaks and things like that. So again, those things that are they're not our bond issues, separate thing, but this is the sinking fund that we've had for about over 20 years in the district. So no changes actually with any of that. We're looking briefly at our general fund proposed budget. You can look at what was the final amendment, which the board approved a few weeks ago, looking at an ending fund balance of approximately $1.8 million. That will, of course, be our beginning fund balance July 1 of this year. We're looking at $142.4 million of revenue, $143.6 million of expenditures, with a deficit of just over $1.1 million. You may recall that when we started our budget process, that deficit was about $6.2 million. We have brought to the Board of Education and proposed and discussed over the many months, one, recommendations of revenue enhancement cost containment items of about $4 million to reduce that $6.2 million. We've also brought forward budget recommendations of approximately $1 million. So what we're looking at using, as you can see, is just a little over $1.1 million of fund equity, leaving a fund equity balance of $629,000 at the end of next school year. Just briefly, the assumptions we used to create this budget: enrollment decline of 300 students, a foundation allowance increase of $25 per student. We have some one-time funds that we used in our other funds for the 2014-15 budget that won't be available next year. We have some expenditure changes, the insurance changes of about $800,000, property and casualty of $200,000, supplies, utilities, fuel at about $74,000. We had some one-time salary costs in 14-15 that's actually a savings to the expenditure budget. And then we have teacher savings of a little under $1.2 million. That's a result of savings from when we have less enrollment, we have less teachers, lower enrollment, we have less teachers, as well as when our teachers retire, we save the difference in the cost between our higher paid teachers and our incoming cost of teachers. Of course, that erodes over time, but that is a savings of almost $1.2 million, separate from the early separation incentive, which we'll see in a minute. The $4 million I said of revenue enhancement ideas, as you can see, we have one-time sale of property for approximately $1 million. Hope to enter an agreement to sell one of our cell towers for $900,000. The Board of Education has improved as a revenue enhancement item an increase limited school of choice, which would raise about $800,000. Of course, the closing of Perrinville and McKinley, $336,000. We have a lease that we'll be asking you to approve this evening, as a matter of fact, at the Cooper site, a soccer lease that for next year will be $17,000, but over the next several years, significantly more than that. And then the early retirement incentive that was approved is about $1 million in savings. So that totals the $4 million in revenue enhancement cost-saving efforts. And then the budget recommendations provided to the Board of Education for approval: reduction of textbook purchases, reduction of 2 FTEs, one both in the elementary and secondary. You'll recall we had some mid-year budget cuts this year that will be extending through to 15-16. We're making some reductions in the central office support and a small change in our expected tax refunds or write-offs for next year for the $1,040,000. So all of those are the changes that you saw that made up those revenue and expenditures in the first slide. And then, of course, we'll be asking you to approve all of the other funds' revenue expenditures as well in the latter part. So with that, if there's any questions.
And actually, at this point in time, it's really just an opportunity for the community to ask any or provide any feedback that they would like to regarding the budget for next year. And if there are any specific questions that would we can handle from the board, we can handle those during the regular meeting when you actually vote on the agenda item. So we can open up now to anybody who wants to provide any feedback on the budget as part of the budget hearing.
All righty. I do have one blue slip from an audience member, Mr. Lloyd Romick.
Good evening. Tonight you're talking about the budget, the various cuts you've made, and what you'll get from Lansing. But this is hardly the first time that you've talked about what you'll get from Lansing. Ms. Bonnefeld gave us a pretty good synopsis of the board's beliefs back when she was talking about Perrinville. She said that Lansing failed to come up with the money. The parents failed to punish Lansing. And the voters failed to pass Proposal 1. As if somehow a budget only matters with what is coming in from Lansing. The vast majority of this budget is teacher salaries. We simply do not have the money, nor is it going to come in from Lansing anywhere in the near future, to afford the number of administrators we have, the amount those administrators are paid, or the amount we're currently paying our teachers. We are simply paying far more than the other districts around us. In Taylor, which had a median salary of about $50,000, their union took a 10% cut so that they could balance it without taking money out of programs. In Livonia, it's over 80, but the board won't even think about talking to the union because it's so much easier to cut programs and money for children rather than to go to the people that help pay for your election and tell them it's time they have to give back. Now, I listened to that wonderful little rant that Ms. Bonnefeld threw out there, and I have to say that that was the single most petulant, arrogant, and elitist comment that I have ever seen from this board, and that is sure as hell saying a lot. You are here, stewards of the money that you are being given, like the rest of us. You don't get to just decry that you don't have, it's unfair you're not being given enough money. You have to live within your means, and that means paying people what you can afford, not what you wish you could pay them. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address the board? I do not have any other blue slips indicating that they would like to be heard at the public hearing. Is there anyone else who would like to address the budget or the millage rates? Alrighty, seeing none, that concludes audience communications. As Dr. Leopa said, questions and comments from the board will happen during our next meeting that will begin at 7. That will be beginning at 7 o'clock, when the board will have more further discussion on these issues. Seeing that, we are adjourned, and we will be rejoining you at 7 o'clock. Thank you. Pardon?
In 1 minute.
Okay.
Were you
Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Livonia Public Schools Board of Education, June 22nd, 2015. If you are watching from home, you may access an agenda by going to our website, www.livoniapublicschools.org, hovering over the School Board tab, and you can drop right down to agendas and follow along. If you're in our audience tonight, we have agendas just outside the door to the boardroom. You can grab one and follow along if you'd like. First item on our agenda tonight is roll call. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Here.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Here.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mrs. Laura?
Here.
Mrs. McDonald?
Here.
Mrs. Bonifield is here. President Burton?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Mrs. Laura, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Sure, please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item on our agenda is item 3, communications. The first item under communications is our district school improvement team update, and we'll be hearing from Mrs. Oquist on that.
You will.
Thank
you. I'm very excited to be here this evening to talk with you about the District School Improvement Team efforts this year. We had a pretty exciting year, as many of you know who serve on that team. There's a lot to cover this evening, so it may seem like we're moving on a rapid pace as we go through the PowerPoint. You have just some of the highlight slides in front of you, and as you'll notice as we go through the presentation, if we get to a slide that has a blue star in the top right-hand corner, you have that corresponding page in your packet. Otherwise, they'll just be up on the screen. So we are ready to get started. As you know, it all begins with our shared vision. That is really the rudder and the guidepost for all of the work in our school district. It stands proudly behind you and has been a beacon for our work for the past 10 years. It's hard to believe when you think back that the shared vision was created with the input of many stakeholders in 2005, and since that time has really been the focus for our efforts in our school district. I've shared this with you previously. It's one of my favorite quotes from Burton Annis. There's no more powerful engine driving an organization toward excellence and long-range success than an attractive, worthwhile, achievable vision for the future, which is widely shared. And I really can think of no other vision which really meets that description more so than the Livonia Public Schools shared vision. It is a true source of pride for our school district. And as you'll see this evening, it also guides our work considerably. As you also take a look in the back of that page in your packet, you'll see the collective commitments. The shared vision cannot come to life without the execution of the collective commitments. The collective commitments talk about the behaviors that we exhibit, all stakeholders in the district, how we act, how we communicate, the way we make decisions, the way we collaborate and communicate. And those collective commitments are as an important part of our work as the district's shared vision. You might remember, and I'll just go through this very quickly because I know you certainly are familiar with this, but because it's so unprecedented, we do want to remind you that we had over 2,500 stakeholders initially part of our strategic planning process in creating the shared vision. We asked those stakeholders 4 questions. When I think of my hopes and dreams for our school district, it would be a place where. I want our schools to be places where. Envision our school district 5 years from now. In what ways would you like it to be significantly different than it is today? And then finally, the most important outcome that I want for our students when they leave our schools is. At that time, we conducted over 50 presentations. We went out and got that feedback and received over 16,000 pieces of individual input in response to those questions. That's still pretty staggering, and I remember being a part of it and seeing a lot of yellow sticky notes in my dreams. Our strategic planning process focused on the shared vision is really, it's long-term. It serves as our guiding force for our decision-making. And even recently, we've done a number of important hires in our district, and we're going to do another this evening. And I know that that's certainly part of the work that we do when we interview our candidates, and also that the superintendent does as he makes those final decisions and takes a look at the tenets of our shared vision and what we're looking for in our collective commitments as we make the important hires that we do in our school district. Let me tell you about the district school improvement team. This district school improvement team is a dynamic group of individuals that represent stakeholders from across our district. We have members of all of our bargaining groups on that team. We have community members, business leaders, parents, students, central office administrators, building leaders, and again, representatives from transportation, from our secretarial unit, from our building operations and maintenance. And they have a very important purpose, and you'll see that both in your packet and on the screen, that the district school improvement team brings together representatives from all stakeholder groups to ensure that the district is engaged in continuous improvement toward the shared vision. And really, these are their three main responsibilities in the work that we do: promote, support, and sustain the shared vision as a blueprint for our district success. They help to establish our district goals through the input of stakeholders in order to make progress toward that shared vision. And they help us to assure, really hold our feet to the fire, that we're working toward those shared vision goals and our district initiatives by giving input on how we're doing with that, monitoring the progress, and tracking performance metrics. You're familiar with the continuous improvement cycle, and as you've seen from just about every school improvement team that is presented to you, as well as our instructional presentations, our school improvement team is no different. We start with our vision. We communicate the vision and the collective commitments. We give input on the current state, and we review that stakeholder feedback, and they are not a shy group. For those of you that serve, we have 3 members of our board who serve on that group. They ask the tough questions, they give the thoughtful feedback, and they truly are invaluable in helping us determine what improvement actions we need to take, and then they help us review and help us determine what those next steps are. So let me share with you. Steve Archibald and I are going to be sharing different pieces this evening of the work of the DSIT and an extension group of that, our administrative climate team. And so we're going to talk a little bit about where we've been and where we're going. The focus this year for DSIT were 3 main areas. As you remember, last year, we were starting the work of revising the district mission statement. We've completed that work, and that was a big portion of our efforts this year. We had the charge from the team to revise and refocus our student climate goals. We're going to talk quite a bit about that, and then a little bit about a new piece of our strategic planning for next year and beyond. And then finally, you remember that we shared with you that although we have relatively few goals, we are continuously working towards elements of that shared vision via some important district initiatives. I'm going to highlight just a few for you, but really, as we talk about them in cabinet, we could enumerate easily a dozen of them at any given time that we are focused on that help lead us toward our shared vision. So let's touch on refocusing our district's mission statement. I'm going to go through a couple of these rather quickly because you should be familiar with these from the process that we talked about last year. Just a reminder of what a mission statement does. It really defines our purpose. Why do we exist as an organization? It's supposed to communicate in a very succinct form what we're all about. It should inspire our customers, our stakeholders, and employees to be part of this greater purpose and why we exist. And it clarifies and maintains focus on what is important. And certainly, as you know, we have had a mission statement, teaming together to ensure learning for all, for many years, and that has served us well. And that resonates with a lot of our stakeholders, especially the staff members in our district. One of the things as the district school improvement team looked at really redefining our mission, they realized that perhaps it didn't meet all of the elements of a classic mission statement, and felt that although it has served its purpose, we really needed to expand that whole idea of why do we come to work each day? Why do we exist as this great organization for the community that we serve? So again, this is relatively familiar with you, but You remember that we explored mission statements from all over, organizations, businesses, school districts. We looked at a number of them. We evaluated those against the criteria. And then we worked with the team to define success. We talked about if someone was talking about Livonia Public Schools as a successful school district, what do you think that they mean? And we really peeled that apart. You can only imagine, if you were on DSIT, you know that that led to some pretty meaty conversations. We identified members of the district school improvement team to be part of the writing team and began drafting statements. As we brought those back to DSIT over the course of the year and even the beginning of this year, we had a lot of input from DSIT. I won't take you through each of the votes, but one of the things that was clear is we certainly had a mandate to revise the mission, but we really, after multiple times giving feedback on favorites, kept coming up with 2 or 3 with almost an equal number of votes. And finally we said, okay, we need to go to a bigger audience. We really got the gist of what we wanted to cover with the DSIT, but we needed to go further. And so a presentation was made to the district communication team with which you're familiar in the fall. And what they told us was, they gave us some feedback on the process we were using, not so much on the mission statement. But what they said was, if you're going to go to folks and ask them their input on the mission, you need to share with them why we're changing it. Why does it need to be revised? They said, we're a great district. The mission should inspire that in people. They thought it was important that we let folks know who was involved and what the process was and that their opinion would count. That we would review the current mission and tell them what a mission statement is. So we took that and we refocused to a better alignment with our shared vision and focused on some key words and concepts, things like pride and passion, prepared for life's journeys. As we went through each vote and got feedback, there were clear themes that emerged. And so we brought that feedback one last time back to DSIT and said, okay, check these mission statements out before we send them out to all of our stakeholders, before we send them out for a larger review. How do these drafts sound when they're spoken out loud? Does it tell the world in our district why our work matters? Does it inspire, reflect, and share our story? So DSIT identified their choices, and we began to engage stakeholders in that selection. We narrowed it down to 4 statements. The superintendent created a brief video, and we sent out an email with an online survey for folks to be able to give their feedback on the mission. We also encouraged some PTSA and DST parents to also give feedback. And although it's hard to read here, this was the online survey. We simply gave the 4 statements, asked people to indicate their first choice and their second choice. Then we also asked for additional feedback. We had a tremendous response. We had over 960 responses from staff and from the representative groups of parents, and over 125 written comments. And many of these can be summarized below. These are just some common themes that we saw. Many people said, I like more than one. Can you combine 2 of them? We heard a lot of that about 2 and 4. They liked the word inspire from number 2, but otherwise liked number 4, and things like that. So you can imagine we had a lot of feedback, and really, although we couldn't take every piece and start that process all over of rewriting, we didn't just want to ignore the feedback that people did take the time to give, because it would certainly have been easy to just vote without giving that written feedback. So you'll see the weighted totals. And number 2 and number 4 came across pretty clearly as the top choices. And so what we did is we took a look at number 4, and we looked at what they really said they liked from number 2, and really what it kept coming back to was that word inspire. People felt that that was a key element that they wanted to include in there. So we went and we included that piece back into the 4th statement, and I'll share the final statement with you in just a moment. But one thing I wanted to acknowledge was the work of the district school improvement team. One of the things that came across loud and clear in the feedback from people were that the fact that they appreciated being asked. They felt that there was truth and commitment in all 4 of the statements and that they represented Livonia Public Schools. And they wanted to thank the district school improvement team. And we do as well, because these folks come in the evening. They not only come that evening, but you'll see we ask them to come back oftentimes in writing team groups and climate team groups. And they really do give their heart and soul. And so I wanted to make sure to acknowledge the efforts of those folks. So are you ready? Yes. Thank you, Sheila.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the new mission statement reads, Livonia Public Schools, our mission to educate, challenge, and inspire every student to achieve personal success and become a confident contributor to society. So that is our new mission statement as certified by DSIT, shared with the Board of Education, and we will be rolling that out in the fall with all of our colleagues. You'll notice 2 pieces of that that we feel are very important and that bring us right back to the shared vision. You might remember that 2 of the pieces that were very important to our parents and to our staff were that kids were engaged, inspired to learn, and that when they left, they were ready to go out into the world. And those are 2 things that are captured in that new mission statement. So we're going to go on now. We're going to transition to the second piece of our work for DSIT. You may recall that we started the school year with 2 climate goals and 1 employee capacity goal. And you may recall at the end of last year, I shared with you that the staff collaboration goal would be wrapped into a district initiative because that was one of the requirements from advanced ed. And so we move forward with focus on the 2 goals related to the school climate. And at the end of the last year, I shared with you that both school climate goals had support for continuing. Folks wanted to continue with the concept of students being emotionally safe in school and students engaged in learning and encouraged to give their personal best. And the strongest support really was for the emotionally safe goal. And so we really had 2 choices this year. We could continue with another round of school action plans. You see a little tiny shadow of one in the corner, where each school creates an action plan and works independently and focuses in on things at their own school. We really decided at this point in time that we had had data from the past 6 years, and we knew our data was going in the wrong direction. And we were very honest with you about that last year. Our last round of data, especially as it related to kids talking to us about how feeling emotionally safe in school, just was not going in the direction. In some cases, it was staying a bit stagnant, but at a couple of levels, it was also taking a downward trend, and somewhat pretty precipitously. And we decided, we need to figure out why. Is it poor execution of the plans? Is it because it isn't a K-12 district-wide initiative and everyone's working on something a little different? And so we decided, after asking one another that question a lot, that maybe we should ask the kids. And that's what we did. Because really, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And that was the bottom line. We couldn't figure out why we were getting the results that we were getting. And so this is the big picture of what we did. And Steve's going to come up and now talk about the staff and student focus groups and what a remarkable process that was to open our eyes and enlighten us this year. So the big picture of what we did is... Steve starts to come up. We decided to go to Gemba, and we've used that phrase a number of times in the past couple of years, and that means go right to the source. Go to where the work is happening. And then we reviewed and responded to that so that we could give feedback to our new administrative climate team. And then, as you'll see as we go through this next portion of the presentation, we're going to talk about how we're doing our strategic planning to work on these new goals and objectives, and how DSIT will be involved in the ongoing review of that progress. So I am going to you recall that in the past we've had these student survey results. We've shared them with you each year. And so although we've done this survey, and again, just last year surveyed over 11,000 students and had our 3rd round of survey, we really determined that although our key performance indicators were giving us some information, and we were really analyzing each individual question, and that's just a reminder of what this is. We went through this in detail last year. We really decided that we needed to take a different tactic this year, and we went out to the schools. And that's what my colleague Steve is going to share with you right now.
Thank you, Andrea. Looking at this, really what this represents is more than, or at least 30 meetings that have occurred throughout the school year with our student focus groups, staff focus groups, administrative steering committees, principal meetings, DSIT, and meetings with the board. And it really represents, again, after sitting around and looking through the data and scratching our heads and wondering why things were going the way they were, we kept asking questions like, well, I wonder what kids would say or this, or I wonder what the kids were thinking here. I wonder what counselors or the SAPs would say. And then after hearing that enough, we finally figured, well, why don't we just go ask them? So we did just that. And the staff focus groups, we did 3 of them. Wanting to keep the groups manageable, we broke them down by triad. They were composed of ESTs, the ESAPs and the SAPs, teachers, counselors, assistant principals, and principals, again from each triad. We brought them together and we asked some very pointed questions. And one was, what did they feel were the biggest worries or stressors for kids today that's impacting their performance or impacting them at school in terms of how they felt at school. And then secondly, we showed them the data and why it is, where our numbers have been with respect to students agreeing or strongly agreeing with the statement, I feel emotionally safe at school. And we wanted to get what they felt the primary reasons that students didn't appear to be agreeing with feeling emotionally safe at school. And again, it was going to folks who are very well connected with kids in schools and know about what's going on in schools, as well as perhaps from their interactions with the students, what they might be feeling. And so we got some very good feedback from them. This is themed. We wrote down everything and all the comments that they made. In addition to asking those questions, we had large group discussion around the table, and then we provided them an opportunity to write some additional comments for us as well. And then we came back and themed them. Some of that won't be very surprising to you. For example, about the 6th one down, the social media, creating bad feelings, conflict with other kids. That's not a mystery for us. And about the middle of that slide, kids don't have problem-solving, coping skills, ability to manage conflict. That was something that we heard not only from staff, but perhaps more importantly, from the students themselves. And we'll touch on that a little bit later, but what the kids told us was, the adults aren't always going to be around. And in the long term, I need to be able to solve some of these problems and issues myself and know that I have adults to go to. And so if you could help us develop some of these skills, it would be great, which we thought was very insightful from the kids. And then towards the bottom, there's one on staff not respecting kids. This was critical. Certainly in our profession, that should never be the case. And a lot of it, as we talked to students and we talked with staff, really came out to be sort of unintended consequences of humor and sarcasm. 2 friends of mine, but they are probably not healthy friends at all times. And so we really hit home on that. And also our interactions, while maybe I haven't been the recipient of some sarcasm or some poor humor, I've seen someone else who has, and so it's a matter of time before it could be me. And so really getting at relationships between adults and students. So again, this was some of the themed feedback from our staff. The student focus groups, probably one of the highlights of mine for the year, no question about it. We did 12 focus groups. We actually did at all 3 high schools. We did 2 groups. We broke them down into 9th and 10th grade and 11th and 12th grade. And this was a suggestion from one of the staff members in the staff focus group. They said, rather than pull kids in, maybe some of your underclassmen might be a little bit intimidated to talk in a small group setting. So maybe break them up. And we also learned that students have some different issues that they're confronted with. And there may be an issue that they were confronted with as a 9th grader that over time they've learned to deal with, and they have different issues as a senior. So that was, I think, invaluable to the process to break them out. And then also we had focus groups at each of our middle schools and of our upper elementary schools. Almost 200 students participated. We had over 800 written comments and some very, very powerful feedback which I'll hit on in just a moment. Again, in the student focus groups, this is just really process. They were given an opportunity to write their feedback, like the teachers gave us, or the staff gave us, with respect to worries and stressors. Students shared their thoughts in a large group. They responded to others. It was amazing how insightful they were, and no surprise how respectful they were of others, of the staff, of the schools. It was really exciting to be a part of. We also then reviewed with them the staff focus group feedback, and they got a chance to participate in dot voting. We wanted to get their perception of, we want to tell them, here's what the adults think are the things that are stressing and worrying you. Tell us where we're on the mark. Tell us where we aren't on the mark. And that was invaluable part of the process as well. Again, the most meaningful and impactful feedback that we received, several things. One is, again, it was essential to get that viewpoint from the students. We've all been there, but it's been an awful long time, and certainly not in today's climate. So going to them, they offer us, and I probably overused the word invaluable, so I'll say an important perspective. It was also, getting the student feedback was important to validate the staff feedback that we got. And again, are we on the mark in terms of what we think are stressors or worries for you as students? It helped us chart the course for all the things going forward. All of our action plans prior to this tended on trying to impact behaviors, which is still an important piece, but it also talks about trying to give them skills and trying to teach them strategies and skills and so forth. And I'm not sure that we would have gotten there without getting that input from the students. And I'll leave it with that. I believe it's you.
Thanks. All right, let me catch back up here. So then, of course, as we always do, that data, we again themed every single statement that the students gave us, and we brought that back to DSIT. And we asked them these questions. What did you notice about the data? Were there any trends that seemed to pop out? What surprised you about the results? And what additional questions did the data raise for you? And that is always the challenge of what we've deemed this year to be wicked problems, that the more that you dive into peeling apart the onion and getting to the base of the problem, it always begins to raise additional questions. But after they reviewed the staff and student focus group feedback, we asked DSIT 4 questions that really led us in our work for the rest of the year. When you think about how students feel in school, what areas do you feel should be of the biggest concern and why? Because you can imagine 800 comments, even though we themed them, that was still a lot of feedback. So what are the biggest concerns and why? What do you perceive that we have the most ability to impact? Because there are some things that are within our sandbox and within our locus of control, and there are some things that quite simply are not. Then what questions do you have for the staff leadership that will be designing the objectives and strategies to make improvements in this goal area? And then what would you like the staff leadership team to consider as they determine these objectives and strategies? So after we did that, we said, we really needed to come back and revisit our goal, which was actually one of our main purposes for DSIT's work this year. So we asked 2 questions. We said, based on all of the data that we've reviewed, should we still maintain those 2 separate goals of students feeling emotionally safe in school and students being encouraged to give their personal best? Or should we refocus on one goal and then potentially have several objectives and strategies that can really be clearly defined to help us get there, district-wide? And so option number 2 was the one that was chosen by DSIT. So then we said, based on your option selected in Part A, should we keep the goal as written, or should we rewrite one or both of the goals in order to refocus them? And the option was option 2. And so now, I think you're back up. That was so quick.
That was much quicker than we practiced. You may recall back in March, I believe it was, you voted on the school improvement goal with respect to students, all students feeling emotionally safe at school. And as we met afterward and continued to talk about it, the term emotionally safe at school continued to seem to be too ambiguous of a term to really rally folks around. And it seemed to be doing more to work against the process and inhibit things from moving forward than it was doing to either focus any efforts or move us forward. So knowing that the board had already approved it, we continued to talk about it in all those groups that we had mentioned previously, and we felt, you know what, let's see if we can't come up with some wording or verbiage that maintains the integrity of the goal that the board had approved and still reflects what it is that we can get everyone behind. So what we have for you is a down arrow. And then think in terms of moving from all students will feel emotionally safe at school, that ambiguous term that seemed to alienate more than it did unite, to all students will experience a positive, safe, and welcoming environment where both students and adults respect and value one another. Anytime we shared the two of these with any of these groups, we got, not to try and sway your voting, but unanimous support with the revised goal. Mm-hmm. The terms positive, safe, welcoming, those all come directly from our shared vision, and that was by coincidence as we were talking about it and had a bunch of stuff up on the board up in conference room A, and then we realized we've been talking about really what we've been trying to live for many years. And the edge that comes with being emotionally safe and trying to define that and being frustrated by that was smoothed right away. And so again, we have the new goal that we are proposing, which I read for you and won't reread. With this goal, there are three focus areas. The first one, it gets at what we heard from staff and from students about teaching the skills. And that's where all students will know and use effective skills and strategies that empower them to successfully interact with peers and adults. And again, I really do think we heard it from the students first, but it just boils down to giving them those skills for them to be able to apply. The second focus area, and when I say that it starts with every, a lot of times the term every or all sort of disengages folks because you have a sense that whatever's going to come after it might be fluff or might be unattainable or you know. And in this one, we just are tied to the term every because we definitely believe that what follows should be occurring in every one of our buildings, in every one of our classrooms, in every one of our schools. And that's that every LPS classroom and school environment will exhibit and promote mutually respectful and supportive interactions between adults and students, as well as adults to adults and students to students. So again, all interactions are mutually respectful. And then lastly is a focus area that has to do with our Gallup polling. And Mrs. Oquist is going to talk about this a little bit more. And if you remember, if you were around several years ago when we did the Q12, and the idea that I have a survey which I have a best friend at work, and that has to do with, there's a link there to performance. But the focus area 3 talks about student scores in hope, engagement, and well-being on the Gallup poll will reach or exceed national participant averages. And we know from the information that we've reviewed and talked with the folks from Gallup that there is a very strong and direct correlation between a student's sense of hope, engagement, and well-being and student achievement. So again, I will end there and turn it over to Andrea with more detail.
Thanks so much. So as we made this determination to move forward with some pretty significant strategic areas of focus, we knew we would have to have a plan in order to move that forward. So we really took a look at where are we now, where are we going, what will we do to get there, and how will we ensure that it really happens? So we believe that we have answered questions 1 and 2 pretty clearly. And really now what we are have our hands in the dough, so to speak, is talking about what will we do to get there. I just want to take a minute to talk about, when you talk about a strategic planning process that is this comprehensive, when we talk about implementation, we talk about a process that turns strategies and plans into actions. We need to get specific about the work that needs to be done, and we need to identify specific initiatives that we will undertake in the next 12 to 18 month period. And so we've really taken this big picture, and what we've begun to do, and I will not take you through the specific action plans because you really would not get to bed tonight, but we have begun very, very detailed action plans for each of the 3 focus areas that identify very specific initiatives, milestones, lead people for each of these focus areas, people responsible on the team, and how we are going to get that work done. And so I want you to know that that will be our focus this summer, to be working very diligently on that. We have an amazing administrative climate team. We've pulled on an additional 12 building leaders in addition to working with Steve and I on this, and we are so excited to get started. We had a tremendous planning meeting last week. We got a lot of accomplished, and we know we have a lot left to do, but we feel we have a very specific focus and a plan to get there. So the last piece of this, I won't spend a lot of time on this evening, but I want you to know that we were certainly asked by DSIT about targets and metrics. You cannot have goals like these without having some targets and benchmarks along the way that we want to reach. So one quick new metric I want to share with you that we are going to be utilizing beginning in this fall will be the Gallup Student Poll. The Gallup Student Poll is a 20-question survey that's given across the nation. It is free of charge to school districts. And it is given widely. I'm going to share with you the statistics in just a moment, but they're really looking at non-cognitive metrics that predict student success. So we know we have a lot of assessments that determine where students are achieving on content areas, but there are very few really outstanding, valid, reliable measures for non-cognitive metrics. And we are really excited. We had an extensive conference call a couple of times with the folks at Gallup. They have been doing this for 5 years now. They're committed to 10 years continuing to offer this free of charge, and so we are hopping on board this fall. We're going to survey students in the areas of hope, engagement, and well-being. We know that each of these, from the work that they have done, they not only track these metrics as students where they currently are in school, they have followed these students on through college and postgraduate degrees to find correlations to future success in life, student achievement, lack of retention, GPA, ACT scores, high-performing, low-performing students. I mean, we are thrilled to have such a robust measure by which to benchmark our students. I'll just give you a couple quick examples in the areas of hope. There are some questions that look relatively similar to our questions because you remember some of those were based off of the original Gallup, and then also some questions about well-being. And we may, again, as Steve mentioned, sometimes you see some of these questions and you say, really? How does that tie in? And the exciting thing is that we know that these have been statistically correlated with each of those measures that relate back to student success. So I thought it would be time for a Dilbert cartoon by the time we got to this point in the presentation. But when we talk about, asking for opinions, and he says it's supposed to make you feel, quote, engaged, and you actually plan to listen to us. Well, we actually do plan to listen to the kids and what they tell us, and we certainly started with the focus groups with that this year. So just last year, this was given to almost 900,000 students across the nation. It started with about 250,000 5 years ago. We have over 350 school districts from which we'll have comparative data, and that's pretty exciting to us. So DSIT is all in. They were 100%, if not more, ready to go. We have great enthusiasm from our building principals on this, and we are planning to roll this out for students in grades 5 through 12. The window is September 30th to October 30th, and we're going to give our first set of the student poll at this time in the fall of this year. We'll have our data back by November, and then we'll have national comparative data back by January. So we're excited to share this with you next year. So again, I think we've just about reached the end. I will share with you that in your packet, you have some highlights about district initiatives. I won't take time to go through each of those, but you need to remember that when we're, as you think about the big things, you have to be also thinking about the small things so that the small things are all going in the right direction. And that direction really is our shared vision. And so thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to acknowledge the amazing work of the DSIT this year. We are very excited about where we're headed, and we are thrilled with the participation of our building leaders as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Oquist. Are there questions or comments from board members on the presentation tonight? Mr. Centers?
I'd just like to say, this is my first year on DSIT. We have a couple of veterans sitting at the table today, and Mr. Johnson and Mrs. Jarvis. But I was very impressed by the students who sit on the DSIT. They gave really unique perspective. I want to thank them. There's community leaders, there's parents, there's all sorts of staff. It's just such a diverse group that everyone had a different perspective, and I think the combination really helped us through this process. So thank you to everyone who was part of this. Mrs. Oquist and Mr. Archibald were a big part of this too, so thank you for all your hard work.
You're so welcome.
Ms. McDowell, who facilitates the meeting, so thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Other comments or questions from board members? Alrighty. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for the work of the team over this whole, I was going to say year, but it really is several year process, and it's going to be exciting to see the results of this next initiative.
We are very excited.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 3B, written communications. Does any board member have written communications they would like to share with the board? Seeing none, the next item is 3C, our audience communications. Audience communications is a time set aside for the board to listen to the community, to listen to the public. It is not a question and answer type time, as frequently there are topics that are presented that the board may know anything from a whole lot to not very much about. So it is a time for us to listen to the community and take that information and go from there. We do ask that each person who would like to present would limit their comments to 3 minutes, and that is so that everyone would have an opportunity to speak tonight. The first person that we have tonight is Mr. John Stewart. John.
I would like to ask that I have the additional 3 minutes of the lady that I'm accompanying here tonight. It's altogether fitting that you have a seismographic sensitivity for words and want to inspire our students. Martha Trafford is with me, who wrote the book on the history of the Livonia Public Schools circa 2002. And she also taught in this district with distinction for 31 years. And is still on the internet at least 8 hours a day in my law office, running my law office, researching, reading, and writing about charter schools, cyber schools, and closely following the Livonia Public Schools. It's also very nice to see my dear friend Diane Laura, because we have been at the Livonia Y with other teachers from the Livonia schools, such as Elaine Marie Kramer and Marilyn Snabb. My purpose in coming here tonight is to thank each of the Livonia School Board members for your hard work, especially Superintendent Randy Lipa, who I was so proud of when I served as a state representative for 6 years in Lansing, and I was so glad to see him come to Lansing. I commuted my 6 years. Randy Lipa exemplified strong and effective advocacy for public education in Michigan and especially in Western Wayne County. As a former state representative of 6 years and member of the Appropriations Committee for 6 years, chairman of higher education for 2 years, I am well aware of the highest respect all across Michigan for Dr. Randy Lipa. We have had private conversations about the school aid fund, that it is a dedicated budget, and the rating of same is one of the worst things that has happened in the last 8 years. The school aid fund is a $14 billion finite budget. When you siphon off money, there is that much less that is left for all the rest of the K-12 schools all across Michigan. More than $1 billion this year, 1/14, shall go to charter and cyber schools. As a result, Livonia students will only receive an additional $25 per student. Each charter student shall receive an additional $146 per student without the overhead, including the busing and legacy costs at charter schools. I am from Plymouth, Canton, and have lived at 5 Mile and Haggerty for 31 years with a law office on Main Street in Plymouth for 31 years. After talking with Dr. Lipa, I have expressed these thoughts on 3 different occasions this past year to our State Board of Education. But of course, we know it is our state legislators who vote on our budget and our funding and our appropriations. In these very difficult times, Dr. Lipa, you have enhanced the academic achievement and accomplishment of our students. You have maintained the reputation of excellence for our Livonia public schools, which have stood the test of time. On behalf of Michigan's children and the students of the Livonia public schools, I want to thank you. I look forward to working with you in your new position at Wayne County RESA, and in my family, public education is the cornerstone of our society and the foundation of our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Our next member of the audience who would like to communicate with the board is Mrs. Jody White.
I have copies of the student handbook if anybody would like to read those. As much as I've really enjoyed learning the last couple of months about how our board's working, I have to chuckle because I like what Mr. Archibald has, and Mr. Leopold has wonderful politically correct comments about him, but I got a phone call from a teacher, went to a student handbook that it seems like nobody can read. It's very clear. We're starting all new agendas, new administrative team. Some of these letters are now making sense that I've been getting from Miss Colleen. I asked Mr. Winery to please assist me with a bullying situation that happened at Churchill High School. There is some emotional stuff going on. It is social media and digital media. Simple. Asked you guys multiple times. And I keep getting the run around. I have Mr. Winery saying that I've disrupted behavior. I do. And it's because I've been asking. John Raymond, he's who I've been working with also. I have another one here from Colleen. She's saying, President Colleen, she's saying that the administrative team to address the day-to-day issues. So I'm wondering if this is this new team that we have started when we have really clear and concise policy and procedures in there. The kids are emotionally distressed because adults don't even read their own guidelines. They're not signing it. Has the parents and the administration sign these handbooks? They're very well written from 1999 in the 680 administrative policy. And so I'm going to quickly finish because I know my time's going to be up. But I went to the police. I asked for a police report, got a police report. Gary King is not going to contact me, according to Colleen Burton, which I think is kind of funny. I have asked to file a complaint against Mr. Leopold because I don't think anybody's investigated the fact that my son was in his classroom where seniors were able to come in and harass him, sit in his seat, and then whack him up over the head. Now, I am irritated. I went nicely to Mr. Lyndon Lewis, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Raymond, Dr. Winery, Mr. Archibald, Dr. Leopold, and you guys don't really want to take us parents seriously. I love the school. I love what you guys are going for. We already have it. We're going to spend more money on new programs, but if we could just maybe focus on what we already have, the stuff's well written. I'm new to the district, and I'm going to stay here for another 3 more years. I'm going to keep coming here every month until someone truly investigates what happened to my son. And because, and I will, and I highlighted it. I don't, want to read it, but, it says, when you're the victim, will report the situation. The complaint will be in writing. It will be investigated. They will notify the parents. None of this happened. I'm the one crying and begging for someone to please come out. Superintendent's responsible for implementing this policy. Sorry, Mr. Leopold, I'm not impressed with your services. I'm really not. Document all reported incidents. I've been asking for the documented reports since it happened, and everybody's laughed at me, treated me horribly, and again, I've been in the area since 1992. I've been a realtor for 27 years. My reputation is highly important to me, and so is my son that has been ruined by the people at the school because you're choosing not to ruin your reputation, because there was a bullying happening at the school, and it was done because of social media and because the brothers were able to retaliate. And, I'm not going to sue because you're suing yourself. We're the taxpayers. And you know what? I'm not going to do it. Mr. Johnson, I would love to talk with you someday because you are an attorney and you probably understand a lot of the stuff that I've been reading, and I really could use some help. If anybody's willing to help me, that would be awesome, because I will be back next month and I will continue to listen how great the school district is, but I'm not satisfied with how you and Mr. Archibald handled my husband because you didn't investigate it. And if you did, could we see the report so that our president can see it, so we can start documenting the amount of bullying that is going on at these schools and the emotional distress of our children? So thank you. And I'll leave those for anybody who wants to read them.
The next item on our agenda is item 3D, a response to prior audience communications. There was one person who spoke to the board at the last meeting regarding the Parentville situation, and they did want some response back. Later in that meeting, we gave some lengthy public response to that individual and to all the folks on the Parentville situation. That response took place before the board vote. The next item on our agenda is item 4, our consent agenda. May I have a motion, please, for the consent agenda?
President Burton,
Mr. Johnson.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the following consent agenda items as recommended by the superintendent. 5A, minutes of the regular meeting of June 8, 2015. 7A, bills for payment, June 23, 2015. 7B, approval of cooperative agreements for Livonia Career Technical Center. 7C, approval of cooperative agreements for Livonia Transition Program. 7D, approval to purchase everyday math student journals.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Are there any questions or comments by board members? No? Seeing none, Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mrs. Laura.
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald. Yes. President Burton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 6A, approval of revised district school improvement team goals. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Bonfield.
We're in 6A, right? Yep. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the administration's recommendation to approve the revised district school improvement team's district-wide school climate goal and 3 strategic objectives for implementation in the 2015-2016 school year.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mr. Centers, and we will hear from Mrs. Oquist.
I'm quite certain that you may have had
Oh, okay.
your bill this evening. However, it's always a pleasure to speak to this. Your final page of the packet you received from me this evening shows the district climate goal, revised as Mr. Archibald shared with you, and the 3 strategic plan focus areas. So I just wanted to be certain that you knew that that final page of the packet is the item to which we're referring in item 6A, and we would request your support.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions from board members? I know we had lengthy information a few minutes ago. Nope. Seeing none, Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald? Yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 6B, Focus School Quarterly Report. And we will be hearing from Mrs. Alice, I assume, on that.
Yes, you are. Thank you very much, President Burton, and good evening, everyone. Tonight's Focus School Quarterly Report is the 3rd of 4 quarterly reports that we are required to present at a public Board of Education meeting to share with the board and with the community the efforts that our focus schools are making to reduce their student achievement gaps. We have 5 focus schools in our district. They are Cass Elementary School, Garfield Elementary School, Frost Middle School, Churchill High School, and Franklin High School. As I've shared with the board in the 2 previous quarterly reports, the one in January and the one in March, we have to follow a template that the Department of Ed has provided for us this year, and that's because there was significant disparity in last year's quarterly reports based on the content that was included in the reports as well as the depth of the student data analysis. So our quarterly reports now are in a template format. This quarter's report is 13 pages long. Rather than read the entire report to you, I'm simply going to summarize the required content that's contained in the report. However, I will provide Dr. Liepa with copies of the full report for him to include in his weekly update to the board, and then this quarterly report will be uploaded to the state's website later this week in order to meet state requirements. So moving on to the focus school report, I'm going to share, as I said, the required content as it relates to activities that have occurred in our schools during the months of March and April and May as it pertains to the diagnostic data dialogues that our schools have had, as well as their focus on teaching and learning priorities. I'm going to begin the activities at the district level, and then I'm going to move to the school level. So beginning at the district level, as a district, we continued our transition to a new data warehouse system called Illuminate, which replaces Class A. We are using the Train the Trainer models, where representatives from each of our schools are being trained by our district's assessment administrator, Mrs. Kathy Baldwin, with assistance from our curriculum facilitators. School representatives have returned to their schools and have trained their colleagues. Illuminate was used at the end of the school year for data entry on our common final exams at the middle school and high school level, as well as the literacy assessment data at the elementary level. Feedback from teachers and administrators continues to be extremely positive with this new data warehouse system. Also at the district level, Coolidge Elementary School leadership team presented their school improvement plan to the Board of Education in March, and Jackson Center presented an overview of the programs at their school to our Board of Education during the month of April. I continue to meet with Focus School team, which includes the principals of our 5 focus schools, our representative from Wayne Risa, and the directors of the elementary and secondary schools. This is where we share our efforts to address our most struggling learners, and we strategize on how to reduce student achievement gaps. In this year's second quarter report, you may remember that I shared with you that the staff at all 8 of our Title I schools are piloting a new online adaptive math and reading assessment called iReady Diagnostic. This assessment provides immediate diagnostic data for grouping students for small group math and reading intervention. It identifies specific skill deficits for targeting reading and math intervention. It provides skill instruction for individual students and also monitors their progress. Since that time, the district's instructional directors have reviewed our elementary assessment program, the purpose of each of those assessments, and the administration details. After a very thorough review and a lengthy discussion, a decision was made to eliminate our current district-developed K-6 pre- and post-math assessment and replace that math assessment with the iReady Diagnostic Assessment in order to provide our elementary teachers with diagnostic information that can be used for Tier 1 and Tier math interventions next school year. The response from elementary principals to this math assessment change was met with applause last week. Plans are being developed to make this shift beginning in the next school year. Moving on to the school level, at the elementary level, the teachers at both Cass Elementary School and Garfield Elementary Schools are engaged in grade-level data digs, where grade-level teams of teachers analyze the results of their 3rd round of universal screener assessments. They reviewed the specific interventions that were implemented and determined which students needed to continue those interventions and which students were ready to exit. They also identified students scoring below proficiency benchmark, and they planned specific interventions for each student based on his or her specific needs. Additionally, at Garfield, each Tuesday, the Garfield Achievement Team met to review students who have not made adequate academic or social emotional growth. Then each Thursday, the Garfield Title I staff and principal met to review intervention groups. They discussed progress monitoring of students and planned next steps in servicing their most at-risk students. Moving on to the secondary level and staying with the data diagnostic dialogues, at Frost, each core academic department administered their third interim assessment, and they compared the results with both the baseline data and the second quarter data. The staff noticed that there were some significant gains in reading, writing, and mathematics at both the 7th and 8th grade levels. But there were two subgroups, the African American and students with disabilities, that showed some mixed results. At Churchill, the administrative staff, content area department chair, school improvement team, counseling team, and student services department met in cohort groups to review the student failure rates at the end of the third marking period, and they paid very special emphasis on the students with IEPs. They also examined the data from their vocabulary initiative and saw a slight increase in student performance. At Franklin High School, the administrative staff, special education department chairs, their school improvement co-chairs, and counselors reviewed the results of the Right to Learn program, and they noted both successes and challenges that needed to be addressed. They saw a growth in student writing ability and noted the need for more teachers to implement Right to Learn with their classes, and that teachers needed more time to collaborate in order to fully utilize the program. The team also reviewed the effectiveness of The Week magazine. This is a periodical that they use for teaching informational content. They looked at the use of that for practicing close reading strategies, and they noted the response from students is that although there was value in the periodical, the students they were struggling with understanding the content in the periodical. And so the staff's going to keep The Week, but they're going to add another periodical to the repertoire next year. They're going to add the New York Times magazine called Up Front, and it's a student nonfiction magazine. Again, one of their challenges is finding time for teachers to collaborate, and they're going to make that a focus for next year. So this concludes the data diagnostic portion of the summary. I'm now going to move to the teaching and learning priorities. Again, I'm going to start at the elementary level and move to the secondary level. At CAS, the teachers place an increased emphasis on measurement, specifically in the area of area and with perimeter. They used the technology resources such as Learning A to Z for teaching students how to read and interpret charts and graphs and tables. They continue to implement close and critical reading strategies with all their students, and they continued their use of the Leveled Literacy Intervention Program as a Tier 2 intervention for students who needed additional support in reading. They continued to mainstream special education students into general education classes as frequently as possible. At Garfield, the emphasis at the kindergarten level was filling any letter and sound ID gaps that existed in kindergarten students. And then at all grade levels, K through 4, teachers worked on building background knowledge and vocabulary development through the use of guided reading groups, by teaching the MESA reading units, and content integration, as well as Tier 2 intervention. They provided intervention to support students reading below grade level based on their Fontes and Pinnell assessment data. And they are striving to help their students improve their automaticity with basic facts and with number sense. At Frost, in the area of math, an additional math class called Math Connections was provided to select 7th grade students, and 8th grade students continued to take advantage of the Phantom Time math support. The staff embedded social comfort activities within each classroom to stimulate improved relationships with students, to increase student engagement in school and in the classroom, and to further building their school culture. The Frost staff continued their engagement in formative assessment professional development at both staff meeting times and during the May 5th Professional Development Day. At Churchill High School, the staff continued their participation in the African American Male Youth Promise Initiative that's sponsored by the Michigan Department of Education in an attempt to close the achievement gap with the African American males. Churchill High School is preparing to implement a school-wide initiative next year that will focus on respect and responsibility. The Vocabulary Initiative continued this period with the focus on content-specific words identified by each department. Post-assessment results saw a modest improvement in academic vocabulary, and Churchill High School is planning to continue this initiative next school year. Their monthly Tech Thursday meetings continued, where professional development focused on new ways to use technology to improve student engagement. At Franklin High School, as I mentioned, the Right to Learn program continued to be used in ELA classes to assist students in developing their writing skills. In both ELA and social studies classes, teachers continued to use The Week magazine so that students were practicing their nonfiction reading strategies, and then students were having practice summarizing their reading and creating argumentative essays where they were taking a position, stating a claim, and being able to support their claim with evidence from their reading. In mathematics classes, the teachers emphasized skills to help students increase their ability to read, to comprehend, and to complete multi-step problems with precision. So as you can see from what I have just shared with you, the staffs at all 5 of our focus schools have engaged in multiple diagnostic data dialogues about student achievement, and as a result, they have continued and in some cases have expanded their existing programs. This concludes our third quarter focus school report. As I mentioned, there's one more for this school year, and that will occur in the end of September. And at that time, I will be summarizing for the board the activities and programs that have occurred that are planned for this summer to help our struggling students reduce their summer learning loss, or at least to maintain what they have learned this year over the summer. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you. Are there any questions from board members? Mrs. Ellis, I do have one question. You mentioned that in the elementary, they're going to eliminate the K-6 test, I believe it was math test, that had been district developed in lieu of going with the iReady diagnostic test. I assume that test just aligns better with the curriculum that they're using and the software opportunities and so forth that they have for the kids. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, as well as it provides much more specific diagnostic data about student performance immediately, so that teachers are able to have immediate information on how best to provide intervention to support students who are struggling in mathematics, but also how to support students who are accelerating in mathematics. So it's going to be able to provide information that will meet the needs of all the students in the classroom.
All right.
We're very excited about this new assessment.
It's
Come on that later.
It's not frequent. We're excited about new assessments, so that's good news. So, all righty, thank you. Any other questions from board members on this? All righty. The next item on our agenda is item 7E. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education, or what we sometimes term a voting meeting. We're going to go through a number of items that the board is going to vote on at this time. You may or may not hear lengthy discussion on some of the items that are coming up, and that is because these items have typically been seen at least 3 meetings, counting tonight, sometimes more than that. So we have, in essence, beat them to death frequently before they get to tonight. So if you're not hearing as much discussion as you'd like, that is why. If you are looking for more discussion on items that are coming before the board for a vote, I do strongly suggest that you tune into the Committee of the Whole meetings. Those are meetings in which we have a lot of question and answer discussion, requests to administration at times for more information and so forth. So you'll hear a little more discussion there and a whole lot of voting tonight. So the next item on our agenda is item 7F. 7E, approval to purchase servers and storage from the 2013 bond. And may I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Laura.
thank you. Move that the Board of Education approve the recommendation to purchase data servers and storage equipment from Sentinel Technology Incorporated, Ann Arbor, Michigan, for a cost of $974,750 and a contingency cost of $97,475 for a total cost of $1,072,225, and authorize the superintendent or his designee to negotiate and execute final contracts on behalf of Livonia Public Schools, School Districts, Board of Education with Sentinel Technologies Incorporated.
Support.
We have a lot of support. We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by, I believe I heard Mr. Johnson first on that. And we are going to hear from Mrs. Salas on that item.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, President Burton. Once again, good evening, everyone. Tonight, we are bringing to the Board of Education two motions that are technology-related. The first motion, as you had indicated, is a motion to purchase servers and storage from the 2013 bond. And as you mentioned, President Burton, tonight I am simply going to summarize some of the key points that were shared with the Board of Education relative to this recommendation last Monday evening during the Committee of the Whole meeting, where we had a very detailed presentation and discussion on this topic. As I shared with the Board last Monday, in March, the Board approved entering into a contract with Sentinel Technologies, Inc. in order to design for the Board and the district an integrated information technology data server and storage solution. And a storage solution includes being able to store multiple types of data. It can store electronic communications, it can store student work and projects, it can store audio data from our new telephone system, it will be able to store video data from our new camera system, just some examples of the data that it will be able to store. It will also include new servers and a secondary data recovering system, which is a off-site backup system so that the data can be stored off-site in case there is some type of a disaster that occurs at central office, such as a flood or a tornado. And it's most likely that this off-site server will be placed at Franklin High School. In March, the Board also approved the purchase of the requisite hardware for this server and data solution from Sentinel Technologies, and so the motion that you have before you tonight is to purchase from Sentinel the servers, the storage, the licensing, and the secondary data recovery system that are all part of the solution that they created for the district. And as mentioned last Monday evening, we anticipate that this solution should be able to carry us the next 10 years, but this solution is also, we are also able to expand the servers should the need arise. And as mentioned, the funds for this purchase will come from our 2013 bond.
Alrighty, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members? Alrighty. Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mr. Johnson, and Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. The next item on our agenda is 7F, approval to purchase replacement of internet content filtering system. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Centers.
move that the Board of Education approve the recommendation to purchase the replacement internet content filtering system from iBoss Cybersecurity, Inc., San Diego, California. The purchase includes new filtering hardware at a cost of $17,894 and a 5-year hardware replacement warranty at a cost of $1,995 and a 5-year filtering software subscription at a cost of $28,311.90 and shipping costs of $159.90 for a total cost of $48,360.80.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Alice, would you like to address this item?
I will indeed. Thank you again very much. The second technology motion that we are bringing to you tonight, as you mentioned, is to purchase a new internet content filtering system to replace the existing system that we have in our district. Again, I'm just going to summarize some of the key points that we shared with the Board of Education last Monday night in a much more detailed presentation. Last Monday, we shared with the board that the internet content filtering system applies to all the computing devices that are connected within our district, and the main purpose of the content filter is to block inappropriate content as well as to mitigate any possible threats. We are required to have an internet content filtering system in order to be eligible for the federal E-rate funds. Last Monday, we presented the board with a recommendation to enter into a 3-year contract with iBoss. And shortly after Monday's meeting, we received a new quote from iBoss for a 5-year contract, and our IT department reviewed that contract, that quote, and they recommend accepting the 5-year quote rather than the 3-year quote. Last week on Thursday, I sent an email to the board detailing the changes in that quote, but I thought I would summarize them again this evening. The new quote includes the filtering hardware at the cost of $17,894. This is a one-time cost, and this is not an increase in the quote that I quoted last Monday evening. A 5-year hardware replacement warranty at a cost of $1,995. iBoss has extended the 3-year warranty to 5 years at no additional cost to the district. And then the 5-year filtering software subscription is based on a per pupil fee of 38 cents. This is a 9-cent reduction from the original quote. This is the 9-cent per pupil reduction from the original quote, which was for a 3-year subscription. While the overall cost is slightly more, it's increased by $7,450.50, the per year cost has decreased by $1,300 per year. And the funds for this purchase will come from the Informational Technology General Fund.
All righty, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members? No. Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is on our agenda is item 7G, approval of agreement with Total Soccer. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the cooperative agreement with Total Sports Wixom LLC and allow the superintendent or his designee to execute the cooperative agreement per the attached exhibits.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. McDonald. And Ms. Abby, would you like to address this item?
Yes, thank you very much. Good evening. We are recommending that the board approve this lease with Total Sports Wixom. We did present at our last committee meeting details with the Board of Education. We're very excited to have an agreement on the table with Total Sports. As you know, that's a long-standing outfit out in Wixom, very successful. What we're looking at is a 5-year agreement. In year one, the resources would to the district would be $17,000, as we discussed last week, because they're getting up and going. That's a half a year that we would ask for. In future years, it'll be $35,000 a year. So the total over the next 5 years would be resources to the district of $157,000. The agreement attached is a fairly standard lease agreement with a couple of exceptions. Number one, this is a cooperative agreement, and what that means is that Livonia Public Schools students and community will have, our school community will have access to the soccer fields during the day and at other times that they might need them, as they're right across the street from Cooper School, and other school communities as well if they need it. In addition, another change is that Livonia Public Schools will be doing some of the maintenance on the property, as we discussed, relative to some of the conditions on that, environmental conditions on that field. And when we negotiated that lease, we did incorporate our costs to do that into the revenue source for this. So we're very excited to have them on our fields and getting those fields active and used in the very near future, and we would recommend this approval.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments from board members? Seeing none, I know the whole community is thrilled to finally have that land put back to good, usable
Right.
purpose for not only the soccer organization, but for the whole community.
Can't wait to
So-
see the white stripes out there in the
Yeah,
field
it's gonna be
posts.
pretty exciting.
Goal
And
posts.
thank you to Dr. Leopa and for the administrative team for working literally for years to get this to happen. And this was in conjunction too with some state money that we were able to utilize to get that land remediated and back to good use. So thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, we have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 7H, approval of amendment with Livonia City Soccer Club. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. McDonald.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the amendment to the lease agreement between Livonia Public Schools and Livonia City Soccer Club for a period of September 1st, 2016 to August 31st, 2019 for a total amount of $153,000.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mr. Centers. And Ms. Abby, would you like to address this item?
Yes, thank you very much. Again, on our soccer theme this evening, Livonia City Soccer Club has been a long-standing member of the community using our fields for soccer, primarily at the Taylor Dickinson fields over there. They also lease a portion of the Taylor School for some office and other functions, and they have requested that we extend their lease for an additional 3 years. And we did take a look at that. We discussed that at our last committee meeting, and we would recommend moving forward. We did discuss the fact that they use part of this lease agreement is they also use our 3 high school turf fields on the weekends and when our schools don't need that on a rotating basis, and those details are in the lease. But we did discuss with you that we wanted to have a little deeper dive with our athletic directors to find out if everything was working out there. They did mention that there's a little bit of maintenance as a result of not just Livonia City Soccer, but other community use of those fields. We talked with the soccer club, and they agreed to increase their fees for the turf fields by $3,000 a year. So beginning at the end of the current lease, which is 2016, beginning in October of 2016, we'll add an additional $3,000 to their lease on the turf fields. So that will go from $8,000 to $11,000, and then we'll use those funds to help with the high schools, with their needs at the high school. So they'll let us know what those are, and we'll go ahead and help them with, if they have to replace a goal post or the netting or fix up some of the turf. So, and then the other part of the lease, $40,000, would remain and would just go up with CPI, as Consumer Price Index, as the lease indicates. So we've indicated here that would be a total to the district for $153,000.
Thank you.
So we would recommend that lease renewal.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments by board members? No. Alrighty. Seeing none, we have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item is 7I, adoption of 2015-2016 proposed budgets and millage rates. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Johnson.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached proposed 2015-2016 Livonia Public Schools budget, General Fund, Special Education Fund, Debt Retirement Fund 2013 Bond Series 1, Debt Retirement Fund 2014 Refunding Bond, 2013 Bond Fund, Building and Site Technology Fund, Sinking Fund Capital Projects, 2012 Capital Projects Fund, Food Service Fund, Health and Welfare Fund, Athletic Fund, Scholarship Fund, and Funded Projects Fund, and the attached 2015 millage rates for operating, debt service, and sinking fund.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Laura. And Ms. Abby, would you like to address this item?
Yeah, first of all, I have to thank Mr. Johnson for reading that motion. That's a hard one.
One of our longer ones.
That's a longer one. Yes, good evening, and we are bringing forward this evening the 2015-2016 budget recommendations. Earlier this evening, we had a public hearing in which we provided the public an opportunity to hear what the property taxes will be for next year, and also to have any comments on those or the millage rates. That was at our 6:45 meeting. We did go through that in detail, and of course, we will make that presentation available on our website, not only with the taping of the meeting, as well as we'll make the PowerPoint available on the website tomorrow as well. So with that tonight, we will ask you to approve these budgets. I just want to quickly go through the PowerPoint that you have at your table. We'll just, since we've already done it publicly on the screen, I think we can just go over this at our table this evening, and then, as we said earlier, I would be happy to answer any specific questions on the budget. You do have the 2015 taxable values in front of you for Livonia and Westland. A little over $4.1 billion in taxable values. This is just about a 1% increase from the prior year, and again, what we had anticipated in property tax values for this year. It's a good thing, property tax values going up. The proposed taxable values and millage rates on your second sheet show each millage rate for each fund that we will be levying this year. First of all, there are no changes in the proposed millage rates for the 2015-16 school year. We'll continue to levy the 18 mills on non-homestead property, meaning not homes. So this is on businesses and commercial properties. That raises approximately $23 million in our general fund. And again, that is part of our student foundation allowance. So as we know, in the state of Michigan, we receive a little over $8,000 per student, times the number of students we have. That's our main source of revenue. A part of that is our local property taxes that we collect. This is required under Proposal A for us to meet our obligations. Again, if we don't collect this property tax, the state doesn't make that up. This is part of our foundation allowance. And again, that's on non-homestead properties. On our debt fund, we have 4.6 mills to levy this year. That's the same as in last year, 2014-15, and that is consistent with what we had projected when we put our bond program together. That is the levy that we expected for this year. Sinking fund, voter-approved levy of 1.12 mills, raising approximately $4.6 million. And again, this fund, separate from our bond fund, which will be used for major renovations, the sinking fund is used for our day-to-day repairs such as roofing, paving, water mains, boilers, etc. So again, that's a voter-approved amount. Next slide, we'll just talk about, in big picture, our general fund budget for 2015-16. I'll just, of course, state that this is an ongoing process. We do budgeting all year long. We start typically in the winter for our proposed budget, adopt that in June, and then we begin bringing amendments to the Board of Education this past year as early as the early fall, and then throughout the year. So a couple weeks ago, you adopted the final budget amendment for 2014-15, and now we're bringing forward the 2015-16 budget, which again, we've been working on most of the year. This year, we anticipate ending the year with $1.7 million fund balance, so that will be our beginning fund balance July 1st. We're proposing $142.4 million of revenues, $143.6 million of expenditures, with a deficit projected of a little over $1.1 million and a remaining fund balance of $629,000 at the end of 2016. As we discussed earlier, and I'll just briefly touch on how we got to those amounts, when we put together our 2015-16 budget with the assumptions that I'll go over in just a second, we were looking at just about a $6.2 million deficit rather than the 1.1 you see there. We have recommendations in this budget of a little over $4 million of revenue enhancement and cost containment items, we have budget recommendations of just a little over $1 million, bringing that deficit down to $1.1 million. So a lot of work done over the many, many months, and a lot of discussions at our committee meetings over that period of time to bring these recommendations to you this evening. First of all, on the budget assumptions, on the state aid, Livonia continues to have declining enrollment. This is a result of birth rates. We have more students graduating high school than we have kindergarten starting. This is a trend that we see in the state of Michigan. You'll remember when we brought information, very detailed information during the budget discussions. We had some of those slides on birth rates, and we saw that trend line between the state of Michigan and Livonia really followed the same declining trend line. So this is not just a Livonia issue. This is many, many districts in the state of Michigan facing enrollment decline today. And as we said, our budget is based on student numbers times our foundation allowance. Our foundation allowance increase was $25 this year. This is net of, it was actually a $70 increase, but when you looked at some of the state categoricals that we're not getting next year, or that were eliminated from the budget, this $25 is actually the net of that increase. So I know we saw a lot in the paper that says schools got between $70 and $140, but that's the gross amount. Unfortunately, after those categoricals were reduced, our number's $25 per student. Our budget assumptions include some one-time revenues that we had from some of our other funds in the district. You see those numbers there, I think a little over $1.2 million. Our expenditure assumptions include changes in our health care fund, a little over $800,000, property and casualty insurance, $200,000. We had our increases for fuel, utilities, et cetera, at about $74,000. We had one-time salary costs in the current fiscal year of $500,000 that will actually save our budget a little bit of money next year. And then savings in teacher costs as a result of retirements and lower enrollment of almost $1.2 million. So that's how we came up with our revenues and expenditures for 15-16. Then our cost-saving revenue enhancement items on the next page, the $4 million that we talked about, helping to reduce that $6.2 million deficit. We have one-time sale of property of about $1 million, a cell tower agreement, and what that means, as we've discussed many times, is actually the possibility of selling a cell tower. The Board of Education has approved school of choice, limited school of choice, for the amount of $800,000 for next year. The closing of McKinley-Perrinville, $336,000. The Cooper soccer lease, which you just approved, for $17,000. And the early retirement or separation incentive that was approved and was successful this year, savings of $1 million in our budget this year. So that provides $4 million of cost saving or revenue enhancement items. And as to the $1 million in specific budget recommendations that we spent quite some time talking about this year, in the last slide is delaying textbook purchases, reducing teaching staff, that's one at the elementary and one at the secondary. We had mid-year budget cuts in this fiscal year, 14-15, that we're extending into the 15-16 school year, so that's several positions across the district. We're recommending reduction in central support. That's a little over almost $300,000, and a small change in our anticipation for tax refunds next year of $100,000. And that meets the total budget recommendations of $1,040,000 that we're recommending. You also have in your packet this evening, all as well as the general fund resolution for approval, all of those other funds that Mr. Johnson read out loud. Generally, these remain consistent with prior years, and there aren't significant changes. The actual special ed program, if you looked at it, it's actually we're just rolling over the final from the 14-15 school year as we're waiting for some final information on our student enrollment and staffing. So we'll provide probably an early update, early fall or late summer to the Board of Education on the Special Education Center Fund. And other than that, most of it remains fairly consistent for 15-16 with the other funds compared to 14-15. And that was a lot of fast information, so I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All righty. Are there any questions from board members? The one thing I know that we pointed out last week, there are a total, or it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 21 positions that we're going to be cutting, and those are a combination of teaching positions, administrative positions, support positions that we are either currently cutting or that we cut mid-year last year that we're not bringing back right now. So Livonia is being very proactive, I believe, in making the necessary cuts in order to make sure that we balance our budget as we're required to do. Are there any other comments or questions? Mr. Centers?
I just kind of want to mention former Representative John Stewart, who was here this evening, was considered a conservative member of the House of Representatives. And you heard him talk tonight about what's being done with the school aid budget. It shows you how extreme the legislature has gotten in Lansing in just a decade. The resources we have are not nearly adequate enough. $25 is not keeping up with costs nearly enough, and it's not fair for kids. It's not fair for our staff, who always have to work for less, with fewer people. The number of people who no longer have jobs because of this. It hurts the community, hurts public education. It needs to change. We're going to keep saying that it needs to change. And I hope that Lansing does get the message that this is an important, maybe the most important thing in our state is having strong public education, and we need better.
Thank you, Mr. Centers. Any other comments from board members? No. All righty, we have a motion on the table by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Laura. Again, Ms. Abby, thank you so much for your work, the work of the superintendent, Dr. Leopold, the work of the entire administrative staff to come together with these budget recommendations that will actually make a balanced budget. This has been an enormous amount of work year after year, and just when you think next year will be better, and it isn't, to be able to propose the budget that you have proposed collectively with our whole administrative team and still have Livonia Public Schools be the brand and offer the kinds of things that we can offer to our students is a credit to your hard work, and it's appreciated.
Thank you from all of us that do it.
A lot of you. We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mrs. Laura. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 7J, approval of the 2015-2016 cash flow borrowing. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton?
Mrs. Bonnefield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolution authorizing issuance of notes in anticipation of state school aid. This resolution will authorize the borrowing of not more than $6.5 million for the 2015-16 fiscal year through the Michigan Finance Authority, or to borrow from a bank or financial institution, whichever is in the best interest of the district.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonnefield, supported by Mr. Johnson. And Ms. Abby, would you like to address this item, please?
Thank you. Yes, unfortunately, we again come before the Board of Education to ask for the authorization to borrow in advance for the 15-16 school year to make sure that we have enough cash in the bank to meet all of our obligations throughout the year. So while we just adopted a balanced budget, it doesn't mean that we always have enough money in our bank account in order to meet our obligations throughout the year. And I know we've discussed this on several occasions, but how schools are funded, not only are they not funded sufficiently, but the way in which we actually receive our money from the state and from other sources provides opportunities during the year where we are short of cash in order to meet our obligations. The one big example, of course, is our school state aid. We receive 11 payments, but those payments actually begin in October. Our fiscal year starts July 1. School starts September, of course, and we get our first payment, 1/11 of our state aid, beginning in October, and then we're paid through the following August. So it's a very odd system, but it meets the state's requirements, frankly, for their issues. Not only do we receive a payment once a month, but we receive that payment on the 20th of the month or the next business day. Well, where districts, not just Livonia, where many districts run into issues is if payday is Friday and the 20th is Saturday or Sunday, we don't get that resources into our bank account until Monday. So as you know, salary and benefits are, 85 to 90% of our budget each year, and as a result, when we hit payroll is our biggest expense every other week. So, along with payroll obligations, we have state obligations to the retirement system and others. So that's one example. In addition to the fact 20 plus million that we collect in property taxes, which we also talked about earlier this evening, we get that twice a year in very stagnant amounts. So the ways in which funds come into the school also provides problems with cash flow issues. And years ago, when you have a large fund balance, that fund balance allows you to smooth that out and allows you to not have to borrow. But unfortunately, with the low resources that the district has today in terms of fund balance, this has been a part of our process each year for several years. We do ask you to issue notes in anticipation of state school aid, which means we will use our school aid at the end of the year to repay this note each year. We do pay some interest, obviously, to borrow. Many years we participated in the school borrowing fund. Last year, we asked for the same resolution to look at both, whether we should go to a bank directly, get bids from a bank, or participate in the Michigan Finance Authority. And last year, it did come out better for us to go with a bank, and we did do that, so that saved a little bit. And we'll look at both of those again this year as well. And you're authorizing us to make a decision whichever is in the best interest of the district to go forward with. And of course, we would let you know at that time where we ended up borrowing from. So this allows us to authorize into an agreement to borrow up to $6.5 million for cash flow purposes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there questions or comments from board members? Mrs. Jarvis.
Thank you, President Burton. I think it's important to note that this comes up not because of a lack of planning or a lack of proper budgeting or fiduciary responsibility, but instead it's a matter of timing. Our expenses come due before our income arrives. And unfortunately, that seems something that not only Livonia, but districts across the state are faced with. And it's unfortunate because we find ourselves in the position of having to pay interest on money that we've already got in our budget and which the state has already promised us to have, but it simply hasn't arrived yet. It would be lovely if we could find a solution to this problem, but right now, this is a situation that we're in, and as I said, other districts are in as well. Not through anyone's fault or blame or anything, it's just the way the numbers fall.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from board members? Mr. Johnson?
Just a comment, and I want to make sure I understand. So what they tell us is they're only giving us $25 additional per child. Then we don't get the money regularly. Then we don't get it when we need it. And oh, by the way, you have to borrow and pay interest on it. That's where we're at?
That's where we're at.
So that $25 increase is now less than that because of the interest that we have to pay to borrow the money to make payroll.
It's true.
A sad state of affairs. Thank you, President Burton.
Any other comments or questions? I agree wholeheartedly with comments from both of our board members who have spoken tonight, and the one that makes me the most crazy is they expect us to open the doors and teach in September, and they'll start paying us in October, giving us the funding that we need in order to cover our payroll. That would be fine if it was up to Livonia to raise their own funds, but when we are by law dependent on the state for the funding, it is inappropriate for the funding not to arrive until about a month after we start school. That being said, we have no choice. Are there any other comments or questions from board members?
Just,
Go right
Ms.
ahead.
Abby, that wasn't frustration
I
towards
know.
you.
Oh, no.
I just wanted you to be,
I know. I share your frustration.
thank you.
I'll make one other comment.
Go right ahead.
Incidentally, the state is now considering having schools open before Labor Day, and that would push our expenses starting in August, but the money would still not roll in until October. Important to note.
And you wonder why school districts all over the state are frustrated. Any other comments or questions by board members? All right, we have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, seconded by Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 8A, appointment of elementary principal. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Centers.
some good news.
Hey.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the recommendation of the superintendent and appoint Paula Kohler as elementary principal at Garfield Elementary School, beginning with the 2015-2016 school year.
Support.
We have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. McDonald. And Dr. Leopold, will you be addressing this item, or Mr. Whitaker?
Yes, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to bring forward another internal candidate to the Board of Education as a recommendation to fill an administrative position. Mrs. Paula Kohler comes with quite a varied background that I think is going to really meet the needs of the students at Garfield Elementary School, which is our last principal position that we have to fill going into the next school year. Ms. Kohler comes with a bachelor's degree in special education from Grand Valley State University and also a master's degree in learning disabilities. She has worked not only here in Livonia for many years, but she actually has worked in some of the most challenging schools in the Grand Rapids public school system, and actually spent a small portion of time, a few years, at a stint in Germany, working with students. She's held several roles, which gives her, again, a wide background, including inclusion facilitator. She's been a resource room teacher, a Title I teacher, and also recently she's been a general education grades 3 and 4 teacher. Has been involved in a variety of leadership positions at the school, including the school improvement co-chair and other activities. And her time here in Livonia has been spent at Garfield. And as we looked at the unique needs of the students at Garfield and who best met the needs within our very talented pool of applicants that we had, we really thought Mrs. Kohler was going to be a perfect fit there. And so the background that she brings, not only a varied background, but a background of serving students who are at risk, really meets the needs as we look at the population at Garfield and how we can move ahead. And so it's with a great pleasure that we're recommending her for approval tonight as the new elementary principal at Garfield.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions by board members? No. Seeing none, we have a motion by Mr. Centers, supported by Mrs. McDonald. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And Mrs. Burton, we are very pleased to have Mrs. Kohler here with us tonight. We're going to ask her to come and allow us to introduce her to the Livonia Public Schools community to come up and say a few words at the podium tonight. I know she's got a little bit of a fan club over there.
Welcome to the administrative team of Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Good evening, Dr. Leofa and the Livonia Board of Ed. I would like to start out tonight by thanking my husband and my kids who have been so supportive this past year.
Come out if they're here.
Richard is right there, and my daughter Maggie. She's my youngest. She's also here tonight. Along with, by the way, the Garfield staff, whom I love. They are also here.
We recognize a lot of them.
Yes, it's wonderful. So I decided to make this dream a reality about a year ago, and my family was so supportive of me with that decision. Without that support, I wouldn't be here tonight. I would also like to thank the staff of Garfield Elementary, including Mr. Bill Green. I've learned so much from each of them, and I certainly view my time at Garfield as a privilege and a wonderful learning opportunity over and over again. Once again, without their support, I would not be accepting this position tonight. Over the course of this interview process, I expressed that I felt I had spent the last 23 years getting ready to do just this. I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm excited to become the next principal of Garfield Elementary. I thank the interviews, a lot of whom are here tonight, and the board for considering me. And I will do my best to ensure the learning and the growth and the happiness of the students at Garfield. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to be able to share good news with the board and with the community tonight. Feels good. The next item on our agenda is item 8B, Teachers for Recall. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Laura, sorry.
More good news. Move that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the superintendent and recall 2 district employment as teachers for the 2015-16 school year. The persons listed on the attached document dated June 22nd, 2015.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. And Mrs. DeMann, would you like to address this item?
I would, thank you. I'm bringing to the board tonight the names of 19 employees who have been recalled from layoff. This leaves 22 persons remaining on layoff from the June 8th, 2015 layoff list, 8 persons remaining on layoff from the June 2nd, 2014 layoff list, 3 persons remaining on layoff from the June 3rd, 2013 layoff list, and 1 person remaining on layoff from the June 4th, 2012 layoff list, and 2 persons remaining on layoff from the June 7th, 2010 layoff list. All of these positions are within the 15-16 budget guidelines.
Thank you. Dr. Lepa.
I just want to add a thank you to Cindy for her efforts to bring these people back so quickly, and also the help of course, Andrea and Steve, who helped her with the staffing, and all the building principals who have worked so hard with her to get this done. Typically, at this point in time, we wouldn't be down to 23 on layoff. It would, be well closer to 100. So a lot of work done to get to this point in time. So I just want to thank them for that. And also mention to our friends in the back from Garfield that you certainly are welcome to stay and watch the rest of the Sinling meeting, but if you have places to be or celebrations to attend for Paula, you're welcome to speak out also. So, thank you.
Are there any questions or comments by board members on the recall of teachers? Alrighty. Seeing none, thank you again, Mrs. DeMann, for your work on this effort. We all noticed there was a significant increase even from Thursday to tonight.
Yes, there was.
So that's all good news. We have a motion on the table from Mrs. Laura, supported by Mrs. Bonifield. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Laura.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald.
Yes.
President Burton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 8C, retirements. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Yes, Mrs. Jarvis.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District adopt the attached resolutions of appreciation for the services rendered by Kathleen Helfrich, Peter Petrovich, Kathleen Taransky, and Robert Woodcox.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers. Centered by Mr. Support. Mrs. DeMann, would you please address this item?
I will. Thank you very much. And this evening, I'm bringing to the board resolutions for 4 employees who have chosen to retire from Livonia Public Schools. These 4 employees have dedicated 95.5 years of service to the student, staff, and the community of Livonia Public Schools. We would like to thank them for their service and wish them well as they embark on their new adventure. And with that, I'm going to relinquish my seat to Mr. Winery for the remainder of this meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Deman. For those who may not have caught some of the subtleties of that, Ms. Deman announced her retirement just a few weeks back to the board. It has been a pleasure working with you also. It's been an honor, and we appreciate it. Your shoes will be large to fill.
Thank you very much. I've appreciated working here.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments by board members on the retirements of our 4 individuals?
Congratulations.
Yes, congratulate all of them and thank them very much for the work for the district. We have a motion by Mrs. Jarvis, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Laura.
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you. The next item on our agenda is 8D, authorization to accept resignations. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mrs. McDonald.
move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District authorize the superintendent or his designee to accept employee resignations on its behalf for all of the 2015-16 school year.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mr. Winery, would you like to address this item?
Yes, I would. For the past 38 years, the Board of Education has approved an annual recommendation enabling the superintendent or the superintendent's designee, the Director of Human Resources, to accept employee resignations and then to report such resignations at a subsequent board meeting. In order to expedite staffing and related personnel matters, it is frequently desirable to act on employee resignations between regularly scheduled board meetings. We believe that the process has worked well, and we would offer the same rationale for extending the authorization for an additional year. Accordingly, we recommend approval of the motion.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments by board members? Alrighty. We have a motion by Mrs. McDonald, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. McDonald.
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis.
Yes.
Mr. Centers.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mrs. Laura.
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 8E, which I would love to skip over, but I cannot. It is the acceptance of the superintendent resignation. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton,
Mr. Johnson.
first I want to preface this motion by saying it is a motion that I was hoping this board would never have to have, at least during my tenure. With that being said, move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District accept the resignation of Superintendent Dr. Randy Leopa, effective August 2nd, 2015. Further, the board wishes to congratulate Dr. Leopa on his appointment as superintendent of Wayne Risa and the opportunity this position provides to serve all students in Wayne County.
Support.
Randy, you almost did not have support there. You almost had to stay.
I had to think about it.
Yeah. Mr. Winery, would you like to address this item? You wouldn't like to do it either, would you? Yeah.
The superintendent works under the terms of a contract with the Board of Education, and accordingly, we requested that the board approve his resignation from his current position. And as he goes, all the staff would like to extend our congratulations on his new position. And though we get the opportunity to work with the boss for another month or so, we'll take this opportunity to thank him for the time we've had so far, and we look forward to the coming month as well.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments by board members? Mr. Centers.
If there are any embarrassing stories that anyone would like to share, I think now is the time.
We're waiting until closer to August 5th.
Oh, okay.
to come up.
But in all seriousness, if you look around the state and you look at districts that have decreasing enrollment, if you look at districts that are facing the financial challenges that everyone is facing, most, if not all, are not in the position that Livonia Public Schools are in. And that is a credit to Dr. Liepa and his entire team. So, on behalf of, the Board of Education and, everyone in the community who benefits from our public schools, I want to say thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? Mrs. Bonnefield?
With a heavy heart, we are letting you go, but we also, on the other hand, know that you will work so hard for Livonia and all the students, which you've done for so many years, and that I know this position is going to put you where you're able to do the most good for the most students, and as it's a loss for us personally and as a district, your influence will continue to be felt and appreciated in our district. Thank you.
Questions or comments? Mrs. Jarvis?
Echoing what my colleagues have said, we're sending you forth with high expectations. Make us proud.
Other questions or comments by any board members? Mr. Johnson?
Yes, thank you, President Burton. When I was elected to the board 5 years ago now, I knew who Randy Liepa was, but I didn't know who Randy Liepa was. And I've had the distinct pleasure of working with him as board president for 2 years. And I found out just what kind of a man he really is. He's bright. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met. And he has a deep, unwavering passion for public education. And you don't find that all that often. And I want to echo my colleagues' comments that it's with reluctance we let him go. But it's a loss to us, but it's such a wonderful gain for all those other students. We're a district of 15,000 students. He's going to have 700,000 students under him. And I can only imagine the influence that he's going to have over those students in the coming years. I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Laura?
Thank you, President Burton. I've known Dr. Liepa way back since '95, and he's always been so impressive. Back then, he was the financial director. Did amazing.
I was the young guy back then.
The young guy, he was.
I was young.
He had black hair.
No comment on it. But he's done amazing things with the school ever since then, and led this school and the district to such high levels, and we're so proud of you, Randy. And like my colleagues have said, we're just saddened that it's our loss, but what a great advantage to everyone in Wayne County. So good luck to you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Mrs. McDonald?
Dr. Liepa, I wanted to thank you and congratulate you for everything that you've done, and I'm sure you'll do a superb job over at Wayne.
I would like to add my thanks. We've said many times that when people at the state level needed experts on education, frequently Randy Liepa was the one who was called to Lansing to explain to legislators what the impact of pending legislation or current legislation is having on education in the state of Michigan. We know what you've done, Randy, for education in Livonia Public Schools. You're everywhere. Parents, grandparents, community members who are not parents have commented to me so many times how approachable you are, which is a characteristic that I've mentioned to you, but it's not frequently seen with individuals that hold this kind of position. As Mr. Johnson said, you are incredibly bright. We are grateful for your knowledge and your foresight and your ability to see the broad picture, catch things that are flying in from the side, and somehow year after year you have kept this district financially solvent. That has been an unbelievable mountain over the last 10 years plus. On top of that, as many of us can say from this table, we've gotten to be friends. On a friendship basis, I'm going to miss working with you on a regular basis. On a professional level, as it is the responsibility of this Board of Education to choose your predecessor, that is a frighteningly awesome task to put before us, because I don't see how anybody can come in and fill that responsibility in that desk the way you can. That being said, whoever is going to come in is going to come in and do it their own way, and we know that. But what you've given to this district for so many years is so very appreciated by thousands of people in this district, and you will be very missed. I'm very grateful that you're still living in this community. I'm grateful that in your new role as Wayne Reese, the superintendent, you will still have responsibilities to Livonia Public Schools, so we'll get to see you from time to time. And I hope that when you are going to be around, you let us all know so we can make sure that we're around when you are too. Congratulations. We're thrilled for you, and we are devastated for us all at the same time. But congratulations. We have a motion by Mr. Johnson, supported by Mr. Centers. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Johnson?
Reluctantly, yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
The next item on our agenda is item 8F, approval of settlement agreement with Livonia Paraprofessionals Association. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton?
Mrs. Bonifield.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District approve the terms of the tentative agreement reached with the Livonia Paraprofessionals Association to amend the collective bargaining agreement between the parties effective July 1, 2015.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Dr. Liepa or Mr. Winry, which one would like to address this?
Go ahead, and if
Dr.
it's
Liepa?
okay, and hit the highlights of the settlement agreement that we have with our paraprofessionals. It's a two-year agreement that will go from July 1st, 2015 to June 30th of 2017. The major item as it relates to the contract usually is tied into salary, and I would highlight that it's a contract that has no increases in wages for the 15-16 school year, and then we'll have a wage and health care reopener for the 2016-17 school year. We also provided you with a summary of different language changes that were negotiated between the parties. And certainly we recommend this, but before we do that, I want to extend my sincere thank you to our paraprofessionals for working with us on this contract. They have an excellent bargaining team that worked in our bargaining team with Cindy DeMann and Jen Terrio, who also did an excellent job. But just to take the opportunity to thank them and to thank all of our employees who continue to struggle along with us as we go down this road of trying to maintain who we are as a school district and what services we provide for kids. I can't tell you the last time that it's been an increase for these particular employees. In fact, there are certain items that are in their contract that are concessions from several years ago that are maintained in the contract, whether it be health care or leave days, or, as you know, the additional amount of money that employees are paying now into the retirement system has been a sincere sacrifice on behalf of our paraprofessionals and all of our employees. And again, I just want to recognize what they're doing to be able to allow us to continue to provide programs and services for our kids, and for continuing to work with us in regards to getting through these very, very tough times.
Thank you. Are there questions or comments by board members? No. Mr. Centers.
Yeah, I just want to say that I know that this is probably a very tough agreement for some of our paraprofessionals. And I commend them for coming to an agreement. I also want to thank them because over and over and over again, I hear just really positive things, especially from our special ed parents, about how hard our paraprofessionals work, how professional they are, how empathetic they are, especially with kids with special needs. So thank you, everyone.
Other comments or questions? Thank you for the ongoing service you continue to provide to the school district. It is recognized and sincerely appreciated. We have a motion by Mrs. Bonifield, supported by Mrs. Jarvis. Mrs. Bonifield, will you please take the roll?
Mrs. Bonifield says yes. Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
We do have a time-honored tradition of bringing forward the members of the bargaining team who are here to extend our personal congratulations for them. So they're here. Oh no, yeah, well it's just Cindy on our side, but we got some superstars over here from the parapro side that worked with us, and we'd like to bring them forward just to say, have them sign the document and then say personally thank you.
Good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
It's a really good
Yep. Got two of them we need you to sign.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shirley.
Thank you.
You all set? Alrighty, thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 9, reports from the superintendent. Dr. Liepa.
Yes, thank you very much, and certainly thank you for the kind comments earlier. This is not my last board meeting, so.
And we're very glad.
I'll save a few comments for July, and I still will be here through August 2nd, which is a Sunday, which I can assure you I'll probably be working on behalf of the Livonia Public Schools on that day, and know that I certainly am available to all of you and all the staff after August 2nd. That's a commitment that I make and promise to each and every one of you. The great thing, of course, is that we have a remarkable staff to my right here and throughout the school district, and we have a remarkable Board of Education. And so, without question, we're in great hands, and the school district will continue to move forward and do great things for kids. So, I would not be taking this job if I didn't believe that with all of my heart. So, we'll look forward to moving ahead, and I know Colleen will make a few comments in regards to the process that we continue to make progress in moving forward to find a new superintendent. And other than that, just want to thank everybody for a great end of the school year, and thank all of you for a great board meeting tonight, because there was some very, very important work that got done tonight, but really took months and months and months to get done. And so we've been working on the budgets and the layoffs and the recalls and some of these other financial items, and the district school improvement team work, which is so important in regards to our work as we're moving ahead, staying focused on kids. It really is a culmination tonight of a lot of activity that's happened over the last 6 to 12 months. And so it has been a great school year and a lot of great things going on for our kids and our community. So with that, I'll turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda tonight is item 10A, establishment of an annual organizational meeting for July 20th, 2015. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mrs. Laura.
Thank you. Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District hold its annual organizational meeting at 6:45 p.m. on Monday, July 20th, 2015, in the boardroom, 15125 Farmington Road, Livonia. Further, that a regular board meeting be held directly following the organization meeting and commencing at 7 o'clock p.m.
Support.
We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mr. Johnson. And Dr. Leopold, would you like to address this item?
Yes, this is a resolution to make sure that we have the annual organizational meeting set. And as you know, at the organizational meeting, there are a variety of things that we put in place that allows us to operate as a school district for the next school year. And so we'll be prepared to do that. We used to have a rule that you had to have this done in the first 10 days of the calendar or the new school year, but that's no longer the case. That's why we can have it on July 20th. And so we'll be prepared with an agenda to meet all of our annual obligations at that time, as long as you approve the resolution tonight.
Are there any questions or comments by board members? Alrighty, thank you. We have a motion by Mrs. Laura, supported by Mr. Johnson. Mrs. Bonnefield, will you take the roll, please?
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is item 10B, hearing from board members. What this board began doing a few years ago now, rather than having 7 of us repeat a lot of the same things, we ask one of our board members to handle most of those comments on behalf of the board. Others are certainly willing to, or certainly welcome to chime in if they would like to. And tonight we will be hearing from Mrs. McDonald on behalf of the board.
Thank you, President Burton. I am honored to congratulate Paula Kohler as the new principal at Garfield Elementary. The support of her staff says volumes as to what type of principal she's going to be. Her love for that school, it just flowed. It flowed out of her. It flowed out of the room with her staff, and excellent choice. I think it'll be wonderful for that school. Congratulations, Paula. Recall of 19 teachers and social workers, a good thing. Hopefully we can get on board and reclaim several more before the end of the summer, so we can get them back in the classroom where they belong. And to our retirees, congratulations. Kathleen Helfrich, Peter Petrovich, Kathleen, oh boy, I'm going to goof this up because I don't have Jill's notes in front of me, Taransky and Robert Woodcox. As Mrs. Demands indicated, they had 95.5 years of continuous employment for Livonia Public Schools, and we wish you the best, and congratulations. And to Ms. Demand, congratulations, enjoy your retirement. I'm sure you're looking forward to it immensely. Congratulations. And congratulations to the Livonia Paraprofessionals Association and continuing our agreement. You know, our paraprofessionals do a wonderful job for our students, and our schools wouldn't function half as well without them. So thank you so much for everything that you do for our students. And lastly, congratulations to Dr. Liepa. My husband kind of joked the other day, so Eileen should vote no. But you know, I didn't want to throw any crutches here, just out of her respect. And congratulations. I know that Risa is looking forward to you coming, and I know several folks around here are going to be very sad of your leaving, but I know that you'll do the best for Wayne County. And with that, that's all I have to say, and good night, and congratulations to all.
Thank you. Are there others who would like to make comments tonight? Again, I would like to thank Dr. Liepa and Ms. Abby and the entire administrative staff for the immense amount of work that the budget was this year. There were a lot of pieces that we saw of the budget tonight. The Cooper site being leased to Total Soccer, the agreements that we have, and we've seen them over the last several months, the agreements that we have with various entities that lease some of our property or our buildings. All those pieces go above and beyond just our fund equity from our students in order to make this budget actually work. I truly don't know how you do it year after year with the budgets that we face and still wind up with balancing and being able to provide such a high quality of education for Livonia Public Schools kids, but it is so very appreciated. Cindy DeMann, we're going to miss you. Congratulations again and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you. It's really been an honor to work for Livonia Public Schools.
Thank you. As Dr. Leopa indicated, as sad as we are to see him move on to another position where he can serve even more students than just Livonia Public Schools, it does leave a task for the Board of Education. We take that charge very seriously. This board decided last week that we were going to go in the direction of likely hiring a search firm. These folks are professional. This is what they do full-time, and we recognize the importance of having not just a superintendent, but a very highly qualified superintendent. Livonia Public Schools is the 7th largest school district in the state. This is not a district, in my opinion, where someone comes in and practices on how to become, how to be a superintendent and see how it goes. This is a district and this is a position that I know I can speak for all of us saying that we feel a great deal of responsibility to have a highly qualified individual come in and fill this position. To that end, we will be interviewing search firms the week of July 6th. The tentative plan, based on their scheduling, would be to interview firms on the evenings of July 6th and 8th and come to a decision on that the evening of July 9th. That is all pending scheduling confirmation with the various firms that we have expressed interest in. What is likely to happen from that point is that we will be having that search firm meeting with various stakeholder groups, making sure that we get a good feel in our community of exactly what we're looking for in a superintendent. We have not gone through this hiring process for 12 years. Again, we take it very, very seriously, and we would like the input of many different groups. At that point, the board will ultimately make the decision following recruiting done by the search firms, interviews with the firms and with the Board of Education directly, and we'll make a decision from there. We recognize the urgency of this decision. However, we also want to make sure that we are being very, very thorough, and we are hiring the best candidate for the job. That is going to be high on the minds of every board member. If you bump into us in the community and say, how is it going? They'll have superintendent search on their brain, I guarantee it. Again, Dr. Leopa, congratulations. It has been our honor to work with you. I'm glad that we are not yet saying goodbye. Yeah, you will be here with us for another month or so, but we cannot accept your resignation tonight without taking a few minutes to thank you for your work done in the district. Anyone else have anything to add this evening? See here. The next item on our agenda is recess to closed session for consideration of written legal opinion from counsel. May I have a motion, please?
President Burton.
Mr. Centers.
Move that the Board of Education of the Livonia Public Schools School District recess to closed session for the purpose of consideration of written legal opinion from counsel.
Support. We have a motion by Mr. Centers. I believe that was supported by Mrs. McDonald? Yes. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Mrs. Bonfield, will you please take the roll?
Mr. Centers?
Yes.
Mrs. McDonald?
Yes.
Mrs. Jarvis?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Laura?
Yes.
Mrs. Bonnefield says yes. President Burton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We are now going to recess for closed session.